Today, I have the great pleasure of speaking with a man of many talents. Joe Curcillo has just written The Generalist Advantage, and he's going to tell us what it means, what it can do for you, how you can improve your business, how you can improve yourself. Absolutely fascinating conversation with someone that has had many lives and that we're going to be sharing today. Enjoy the conversation with Joe Curcillo. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. So if you've been following me for the last 200 episodes, you know that I love inviting people that have a story, that have something to share that we can learn from. And today I've decided to invite actually several people. I've invited a master communicator. I've invited a lawyer, an engineer. I also asked a former judge to come who is a prosecuting attorney. I also asked a private investigator, a fine artist, a woodworker, and I thought that with all the mix, I should have a mentalist to have this debate. Ladies and gentlemen, there is actually one person and only one person, because Joe Curcillo, who's my guest today, has been, he's doing all those different work, and it's absolutely amazing. Joe, thank you for taking the time to be with me today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be in your company today, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
It's just crazy, all the things you've done in your life. I mean, from engineer to woodworker, and now actually you're launching on the 1st of March, your book, The Generalist Advantage, and we're going to dive into that for sure. But first thing first, tell us a little bit of your journey and how do you make your decision to go from one thing to the other?
I tell people I'm not sure it was ever really decisions. It's more of what I call professional ADD. Once I learn something and I feel like I've reached a comfort level with it, I jump into something else that I'm not comfortable with. And I try to learn something new. I live in a world in my head where every day I ask myself, what did I learn new today? And if I can't answer that question, I don't sleep, because I need to feel like I learned something new every day. And it has driven me since I was in grade school. In fact, it's funny because I was an artist when I was in high school, and I painted all the time, did stage sets at my high school. Then I became an engineer and I quit art. Then I went to law school and never painted again. And during the pandemic, I received a phone call from a friend of mine who, Uri Geller, the great mentalist, called me and said, "Why aren't you painting again?" And I went, "What?" He said, "Well, you love Salvatore Dali. I know you do. I think you need to start painting again." And what I realized was I had forgotten how to paint. So it became a challenge to teach myself again. And now I do it on a regular basis, but it's always something where I want to say something flips a switch in my head and I say, it's now time to do something different. And if I can say where it really started education wise, when I was in high school, I told my guidance counselor that I wanted to be a lawyer. I also told my guidance counselor I wanted to be an engineer. And they said, you can't do both. You have to pick one, because if you go to engineering school, you'll never get into law school. Most students took that as advice. I took it as a challenge. I went, no, I'm going to do this. So I got accepted to engineering school, became a civil engineer, got my EIT, which is the engineering training certificate that says I can get licensed in 5 years. And the minute I got that, I took the acceptance at the Temple University School of Law and went to law school. And I worked as an engineer through law school. While all my friends were working as law clerks, I was walking high steel. In fact, I tell people I love having this on my desk because it's my favorite paperweight. My job was to climb high steel and inspect these bolts that were holding the buildings together. And I loved doing it. And I went, no, tax both sides of my brain every day, all the time. And that's what I love.
So you say you were a former judge.
Yes, okay. I was a juvenile judge back in 2010.
But would you use your training as an engineer or your skills as an artist to work as a judge?
Yes, absolutely.
How did you
That
do that?
is, yes, let me tell you, that is what I call cross-disciplinary thinking. And it's what I encourage everyone out there to do. And I'm going to give you the answer to your question, but I'm going to ask everybody to listen to the perspective I'm giving you, because this is what's going to make you better at everything. You asked the question, do you use the skills when you were a judge? I asked the question, how can I use the skills as a judge? And I ask people to think about that because, for instance, when I would sit in juvenile court, the prosecution would present the case they had against the juvenile. The defense would challenge the case. As an engineer, I was able to take the evidence, and I used this as a prosecutor before that as well, to put the evidence in very specific order so that I could analyze it better than anyone else. I, as an engineer, was very meticulous, mathematical. I looked for that in the evidence. I looked for it in the child's history, and I was able to perceive things that were missing. That, for instance, they might not have given a child an extra chance at counseling on a certain area because somebody skipped over a step.
Mm.
So my engineering was so OCD that I could catch on to that. But then the artist side of me always was in deep inside of me, that ability to recognize art and appreciate art. I saw the picture of the child's life because I'm very visual.
Mhm.
So again, I will tell you, and I share the story. If you don't mind, I'll share a great story, which is I had a kid in front of me that I knew that every time he came in front of me, he was going to curse me out. And I knew that. So seeing the big picture, I knew it was a matter of time. So
Mhm.
he came in, he cursed me out. I just gave him the time. The last time I ever saw him was right before he became an adult and he was about to be released. And I looked at him and I just said, do you know what I see? Two options. I picture your life, Kurt, where you're going to go out there and you're going to end up in adult prison for the rest of your life. And you're going to get 3 meals a day and you're going to be behind bars. Also see a version of you where you're going to realize when you get out that you messed up. And I see you as a father and a husband and a successful member of society. 5 years later, he came into my law office to ask me to come to his wedding
Oh, wow.
because his girlfriend was pregnant and they were getting married.
Oh, wow.
And he was running a small business in downtown Harrisburg, and he wanted me to be part of the wedding. And I went, oh, good. My art saw the picture. I just didn't know which one he would choose.
It's amazing.
So,
Amazing.
and it's just because I see things in my head and I'm very open-minded that way, because
Mm.
that's also the mark of a generalist, open mind. So
Absolutely.
I've lived
You're
that.
talking about multidisciplinary approach,
Yeah.
which I love. Remind me, I think it was 15, 20 years ago, I read this book called The Medici Effect. And at the
Yes.
time of the Medici, they will bring different discipline together and ask people to work together. And by the way, the Weizmann Institute in Israel, out of the 10 most used molecules, I think it's 4 or 5 that have been discovered there because they believe in serendipity and in bringing people from different
Yes.
discipline that work together. So somebody like me, okay, any individual, how can I cultivate this multidisciplinary approach?
Okay. Well, as an individual, how do you do it? I started off today by saying, ask yourself, what new did I learn today? It's a matter of finding something new today.
Mm.
So, like, what did you do yesterday that you never did before? Okay. And you said you were flying,
Yeah, I
right?
took my first flying lesson on the Cirrus.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that first flying lesson is the first step towards a multidisciplinary, because once you're flying, not only are you an event planner, a businessman, and an author, you're now a pilot. So you start to see how all of these lanes that we build just start to grow and run, and we jump. The more you do it, the easier it is to jump from lane to lane. Um,
Hmm.
in my new book, there's a whole section on learning skills and how to become a faster learner and how to become what I call an instant expert. And I encourage people to take the time to learn something new, because if I can explain, and I'd like to just explain a difference, multidisciplinary is all of the things that we do. When we bring people together in a multidisciplinary setting, for instance, in medicine, there's been multidisciplinary teams for years. They bring people in who are from various disciplines, and they all throw out ideas. In a corporate setting, we tend to do that, and then we put everybody together, and it becomes interdisciplinary. So I always tell people to imagine multidisciplinary as a fruit salad, okay? Interdisciplinary is a smoothie. Everything operates at one. It all uses a different texture. But here's where the magic comes. And living all your lanes is great. But the magic comes when you take that smoothie and you come out of left field and dump tequila in it. That is cross-disciplinary. Because what you do is you take an idea from another discipline, throw it into a different discipline, and amazing things start to happen because you're not in that silo anymore. And you start when the lanes start to blur, that's cross-disciplinary. And that's what makes people achieve, as far as I'm concerned, greatness. And that's what I encourage people to do is just go learn something new and start something new.
So from fruit salad to smoothies to adding
A
tequila.
margarita, baby. Yep, that's
I love that. And a cigar.
And a cigar. Well, you got to have the cigar. That's how you celebrate your victory, of course.
Well, I can tell you that yesterday in my first slang lesson, I had a great instructor, Jason, next to me, and I cross discipline and remember the book, The Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy.
Yep.
When they say, Eric, don't panic.
That's
There's
right.
Too many things to do at the same time.
Goodbye and thanks for all the fish.
Exactly. 42.
Yes.
How do you maintain knowledge in all the discipline? Because you're a mentalist, you're an engineer, you're an attorney, you're a judge. How do you keep track of everything that is happening in all those different disciplines?
Well, I'll give you the two answers. One has 3 secret ingredients: a very tolerant wife, a lot of caffeine, and a enraged sense of curiosity. Now, the serious answer of how you do that. I am never going to be the guy as an engineer that designs a 46-story structure because that's not what I've chosen to know.
Right.
What I have chosen to know is the theory behind engineering, to know how things work, to understand how it happens. And in my life, I was an inspector, so I know how they're put together. I just can't tell you why they use a certain bolt or why this. So my narrow focus when it comes to the private investigator, all I have ever focused on is I'm a pretty good tracker. I get on the internet, I can find people. And I help the PI that I work with out of LA. Every so often I jump online and start tracking people because that's all I care to do. So you have to define what I call, and what I write about as a lawyer. We used to always have what we called the controlling question. What is the specific question you're going to ask to get the results you want? You have to figure out what the controlling question is. So for you, I'm going to use your example of flying. Your controlling question, do you really want to fly jumbo jets and be an international pilot? Probably not. You just want to learn to be able to get up there and see the world at 15,000 feet and land successfully and be happy doing it.
And be able to come and see you and have a cigar.
Yes.
And
Right. So that, in other words, there's that focus of how big of a gap do you want to have, where I know enough about what disciplines I'm in. But on the other hand, when it comes to being a lawyer, a strategist, I want to say my life as a business advisor, they're my deep dives. They are the front-facing professions that people see. The investigator, the artist, the musician, the mentalist, that all backs up and is basically supporting. So I'm going to use an example that I use, Eric, which is when I work with corporations, I go through what I call the symphony of disciplines. So your first violins are the strongest that you have. That's what everybody sees when they first sit down, all the beautiful violins and the tuxedos. And then behind them are the second violins. They're your second strongest careers. And over to the right, you see the big, beautiful basses. And that's your tertiary disciplines. Everything else in the orchestra fills in all the pieces that make up who you are. and they don't have to be as deep. They, like, for instance, my joke is with hobbies. If you picture the guy in the back of the orchestra with a triangle, he just has to know when to tap it. So your hobbies don't have to be as absorbed as everything else. So I put those in the back because I just want to hear the xylophone ring a couple times.
Mm,
And that is what I see as how much of your life have you already lived that you have forgotten
mhm,
is multidisciplinary because
mhm.
someone told you to be a specialist. And
Yep.
my role is to keep people bringing all that back again. Don't just stay in your specialty. Be all of you. Be everything you ever have been. And I can sit here and tell you, I have discussions with people all the time where they tell me they've never done anything else. But then I found out they shoveled driveways and mowed lawns when they were a kid. And I talked to them about how they kept their relationships up with their neighbors to get the lawns mowed, how they ran the lawn mowing business, how they learned when they were younger, but they forgot what they learned.
Amazing.
So,
So I'm listening to you and thinking, that there's two way I see, and I'd love for you to share some concrete successful example of what you've done already. I'm looking now as you as a generalist, and by the way, you're absolutely right. People love to put everyone in the box.
absolutely.
And as soon as you get out of the box, first they're confused, or second, they say, it's never going to work until it does. But
Right.
okay. So the first thing I see when it comes to the generalist advantage and it comes to businesses, the first one is I look at the different discipline within the business. The salespeople who never talk with the marketing people, the production people who thinks that the marketing people are wasting the money, and so on and so forth. And the second one is then you as an advisor as well, not only bringing people together, but using all your different expertise and experiences and stories to basically advise the business. So how does that work concretely?
Well, if you get people together, and I'm smiling as you're asking that because I'm currently involved in a situation where I was brought in to help one specific silo function better. And I'm trying to figure out myself over the last couple of weeks, well, what's the problem? Well, when I started interviewing everybody in all the other silos, every one of them said, oh no, that's where we send all our great ideas to die.
Oh, wow.
And I went, oh, so wait, I'm here to bring all your old ideas back and get this silo running. Well, what's funny is they weren't wrong. That specific, I don't want to get into details because I don't want my client pissed, but that specific silo was
The
clogged.
blocker. Mhm.
Everything was jammed because it was understaffed. And frankly, I had questions about the person that was in charge of it because the person just knew that if they didn't do anything, nobody ever cared. So now what I'm trying to do is take the new leader of that silo, and we are going to start meeting with every other silo and getting them all together. And
Mm.
eventually, the goal is to have them all get together in one room once a month or once a quarter to go through what they're all doing so they all now know how they work together better. And once I have that strategy in place, which they know where I'm going, next week we're doing all the individual meetings.
Mm.
And I've talked to the big boss, the CEO, who is going to arrange to have a group meeting at the end of the first quarter. So we already
Mm.
have it mapped out that we're going to put everything out on the table because I'm convinced that once they all hear from each other, they will have a better idea of where they belong and how they can contribute to the whole. Because the person over in marketing might have great ideas, but the finance department doesn't want to spend money. So the question becomes maybe the finance person can point out to the marketing people a better way of going where they want to go within their budget, which I've seen before. I mean, you can sit down and say, look, you just stop the pipe dream. You don't need X, Y, and Z. What you need is X, and get them to talk about it. So that's where we're going with this specific project is getting them to sit down and work as a unit and realize they all support the whole and they are not just alone because that's
Right.
what people tend to think.
Yeah. And by the way, in this circumstances, it's always better to have somebody external coming in. You look more neutral and hopefully bring those people together.
Yep. And I'll also tell you, one of the things I want to point out is the more you learn and the more you step out of your silo, I've written a lot about it, but the more you do, the more you are aware of your own biases, the more you're aware of your decision making because you stop making assumptions when you see new things and you stop realize it's in other words, the marketing people, they have all these great ideas. And then the finance people are just set in their rut where they just don't want to spend money and they don't want to be blamed for anything. And they don't realize how narrow focused they are. And at the same time, the marketing people don't realize how out of control they are. If people have to realize, wait, let's pick my lane. Now, if I'm going to start working with other lanes, I have to start thinking like they do. I have to start changing the way I think so we can all cooperate. And that's what an outside person brings to the table
Yeah.
is I don't go in with preconceived notions. I go in, as I always say, first day I walk in stupid. I don't know anything. It's up to you to teach me. Because
So everything you're saying, and it not only makes a lot of sense to me, and I also thinking to be able to succeed in that, you need people in the business. First, I think you need the head, the CEO, to be totally on board and developing a culture of being open. And it's okay to disagree and speak your mind. But you also need from the each individual a good mindset. And it's so difficult to change. How do you use your experience to basically achieve that?
well, you have, first of all, this is we go back to pure communications, number one.
Mm, mm,
And my rule of communication is I ask people the question, what's the difference? What is the opposite of talking? And people always say listening. Well, no, the opposite of talking is waiting to speak. You're either speaking or you're waiting to speak. So I tell people, don't wait to speak. You speak and you shut up. Don't wait to speak. That's when you start really listening. And when you listen to people, you will hear more from them if you're not speaking to try to shut them down. So my
right.
first order of business is I want to hear from everybody. Now, again, I go back to the same thing. Where does the generalist come in? I walk into a room of 20 people. I have done so many crazy things in my life that there is a very strong chance that I'm going to have a personal connection with every person in that room and be able to relate to them. Because
Mm,
if they're scientific, I can relate to the science. If they're artistic, I relate to the art. If they're financial, I was a CEO of my law firm for 20 years. I know how to run my books. I can talk finances.
mm.
So what happens is getting them all into a room, I can communicate across all the silos because that's where I'm comfortable. I currently am working with a friend of mine who is a CEO. And what we're doing is I am just helping him reframe his mindset and take over his job as a generalist. And he's embracing being a generalist. And what's happening is everybody is coming to him with everything because every silo knows that he understands them. And that empowers him to be a better leader and it empowers them to communicate better with him. So that's really, to me, where it all comes down to is how do you increase that flow of communication and how do you keep it going? The more you're willing to learn, the more you can talk to anybody about anything.
Absolutely.
So that's what drives me.
And
And
how do you use your mentalist skills?
oh,
Joe?
well, that's funny. I use them by being entertaining and doing shows for my clients as well. But it's funny because I have one of my clients who, at the end of a meeting, will always look at me and say, so what did your spidey senses tell you?
Your what?
He calls them my spidey senses from Spider-Man.
Oh,
He calls them
okay.
my spidey senses. And we had a meeting yesterday and he looked at me and said, well, what did your spidey senses tell you? And I said, my spidey senses told me that that presenter was full of crap. And he said, tell me why. And I gave him everything. And this is when you say the mentalist. It wasn't just body language. It was, I don't believe in just body language. I believe in full communication, holistic
Mm,
approach. As I'm listening to the guy, what I realized was he was avoiding being specific. He didn't want to give them a direct answer. And what he was trying to do was land a contract. He was selling and he wasn't listening to them. So what I realized is his focus was on the sale, not their success. But that's because I am not listening to him for content. I'm watching him as the mentalist guy on stage, where I bring somebody on stage and I'm just looking at them to see what I think or how I believe they're going to answer me. But I do that in meetings all the time. And this one client likes to call me out on it because he knows I will do a reading on a person based on what I see and give him some really good advice. And he also knows, by the way, this guy's known me a long time. He also knows there are times when I'm wrong. And I've told him, hey, well, I made a mistake on that one. But the truth is, the mentalism comes in because to be a successful mentalist, you have to be a very keen observer.
Yep.
And that's really what it's all about. So
Fascinating. You said something that struck me a lot is when you say you're giving feedback, or you tell the person exactly what you think that probably few people would do, and that obviously resonates with me because that's who I am in general. When you have a culture in a society and in business where there's a lot, and that's a personal view, of course. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you have a culture that is basically always worried about offending someone, that is
yep.
about political correctness and wokeness, how do you manage to be the generalist that is going to tell people exactly what they need to hear to be better instead of what they want to hear to feel good and actually make no change?
Well, I want to say that the question you just asked is the filter that I use to choose my clients.
Ah.
If people, like, for instance, and I'll use an example that's not related directly to me, but a friend of mine was on the board of a law school, and the law school has a 36% pass rate on the bar exam. And she's on the board of directors. She raised issues regarding improving bar pass rates. The board said, our concern is the mental health of the students first. And she called me to say, I just want you to know I stepped off the board today. Okay. I don't want to insult anybody, but I tell the truth. That's my problem. I live my life avoiding bias. I don't have preconceived notions. I think things through very intensely, so I don't jump to conclusions on anything. But I will say what I'm thinking. And if my clients can't handle that, I can't be there. I worked way too hard in my life to find what makes people successful. And most of my clients know that. I will say I've had clients where certain people in their C-suite have thought I was too abrasive,
Mm.
and it might have taken me longer, but I did win them over because one thing they know about me is if it comes out of my mouth, A, it is true, and B, it's a hill I'm going to die on because I say what I have to say. I'm going to use an example because it's like it frustrates me. I can create employee engagement and retention by giving them something to make them feel like they're accomplishing something and make them feel like they're part of the whole because they will be part of the whole, not because I stroked them and told them how great they were. I want people to feel like they're contributing to the big picture because that is our job. Every one of us is supposed to be doing something for the big picture. And I'm going to go back to you flying. But if you can just look at everything you do from 30,000 feet and see the big picture, you'll see where everybody fits in. And if you tell them the truth, I got to tell you, there's yesterday, Tuesday, I forget what day today is. I don't even know. But Tuesday, somebody called me with a problem and I said, you got to get rid of him. Oh, no, we want to fix him. No, you can't. He's costing you too much money. You want to keep him? Good. Call me back in 6 weeks and tell me you still got a problem with him. I'm going to give you the same advice. It's not going to change. So that's kind of how I roll.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. And it's insane to me what people they always tell you, oh, we need to be comfortable having uncomfortable conversation until the moment you start having uncomfortable conversation, then everything is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I always say it's up to people to develop their own safe space.
Mhm.
I can't tell you what safe space looks like for you. I can't tell you. Like, so I was in a company where they're talking about creating safe spaces where they can have places where people can go. As soon as you open the door, someone negative is going to walk in that room and crash it on you. It's up to us. And I mean, for me, I suck, by the way, at guitar. I am very proud to say I am proudly the world's worst guitarist. But when I'm frustrated, put a guitar on my lap, let me make bad music. And when it's over, I will feel better.
Nice.
Yeah. My wife once was on the third. I'm in the basement. She was on the second floor of the house. I came upstairs and she said to me, "Bad day." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm good now." She goes, "Yes, I could hear the Santana playing over the loudspeakers. You had it up really loud." I said, "Yes, I was drowning out everything around me."
That's when you get when you go to the executive floor.
Yes, yes. So it's up to us. Just find your lane and just have fun in it, and then get out of it and keep crossing lanes. The more you stay busy, the happier you're going to be.
And I always say about the safe space that you mentioned, I believe there's no safe space. I
No,
believe
no,
there's safe people that create
yeah,
an environment when you can be yourself. But the life in general, whether it's personal life or business, for me is always better when you have people that are telling you exactly what they think instead of being slick and
yes. No, true story. I guess I want to say, for me at least, my perspective is I live life in so many lanes that if I don't feel good in one lane, I switch lanes. Like you asked me earlier, how do I decide? I don't.
Mhm,
It's just
mhm.
all of a sudden something fascinates me and I dive into it. I mean, if I can tell you the quick story. So my business advisor, Mark Levy, who
Yep,
you know, a
big, big
year
guy.
and a half ago, I sat with him and he said to me, "I want you to read a quote." And I said, "Okay, what quote?" And it was from Walt Whitman. And the quote was, "Do I contradict myself? Well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." And he
Mhm.
said, "What does that mean to you?" And I said, "I don't know. I guess I have to learn about Walt Whitman first." And he said, "Okay, well," as a funny answer. So he said to me, "What does that quote mean?" Well, I spent about a year and a half. Not only did I actually go to Walt Whitman's grave and tour his house and read
Wow.
everything written about him, I then wrote the entire book that is coming out. And only about 3 weeks ago, I sent Mark Levy an email that said, "By the way, you asked me a question a year and a half ago. Here's your answer." It took me that long to answer that question
Wow.
because to me, that was a labor of love to find out exactly what Walt Whitman meant by it. And to me, that's phenomenal. In a learning experience, I just feel like I learned what I needed to learn, and
Mhm.
life was good. And by the way, since I mentioned Walt Whitman, I can also give you one of my other favorite quotes of his, which is, "I celebrate myself, I sing of myself, and what I assume you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you." Which basically means we are all one. How we interrelate with each other, we're all part of each other, and everything that we all do merges together as one. And that is how I believe people should live and people should be. So,
And that's what you're writing about as well.
yes, yes, because I think that we all should walk in lanes. And if I can tell you one of my favorite things, which I dive back into some old stuff in history, but most people know the cartoon Snow White by Walt Disney, and you recognize Snow White's face. Well,
Mhm.
Snow White's face was modeled on Hedy Lamarr, who was an actress in the 40s and 50s. And Hedy Lamarr was a very well-known actress back then, very beautiful, striking individual. And so striking, they modeled Snow White after her. Well, Hedy Lamarr lived in multiple lanes. And let me tell you that because of Hedy Lamarr, you were able to be on the telephone yesterday driving your car. Because of Hedy Lamarr, we are able to get in our car, drive 20 miles, and never lose our cell signal because Hedy Lamarr invented signal hopping.
Wow.
And that was her hobby. She invented signal hopping. And by the way, when she presented it to the Navy, they weren't interested in it at first.
Ay, ay,
But
ay.
she figured out how to get signals to transfer from tower to tower without losing connections. So I use her as one of my favorite examples because here she is as an actress, seen as an actress, but was a scientist on the side, that just did great stuff. Or one of my other favorites that I talk about is a guy named Otto Rohwedder, who I talk about people that change the world in different ways that we don't think about. Otto Rohwedder, by the way, I use him because I love his name. It's just a great name to say out loud. Otto was a jeweler in St. Louis, Missouri, started as an apprentice jeweler, started to learn how to work machines and create metal jewelry and work with machinery, and learned as an engineer. Then he decided, oh, I'm bored. So he went to optometry school and learned again how to make glasses and work with all this stuff. Then got bored again and decided to go into the baking industry. And when he went into the baking industry, everyone told him, bread has been the same since the Bible. What are you doing? And he said, no, I think the world will want pre-sliced bagged bread. And he invented the first slicing and bagging machine for bread. How many people listening to this picked up a slice of bread yesterday? It's because of Otto Rohwedder, who changed how we do things because he lived in multiple lanes and brought different ideas with him because he wasn't bound by the locked in mindset of that silo of bread making, which never changed. He changed it. So you go to the grocery store, there's an entire aisle devoted to Otto Rohwedder. It's
true.
yeah, I mean, you understand this is the people that don't get stuck in a one lane. They just hop lanes and bring ideas with them. And I by the way, I'll also plug one of my favorites is back in the day, there was Paul Winchell, the ventriloquist, and he was big on television in the 60s. He got bored with his fame, hooked up with a guy named Dr. Heimlich, who we all know for the Heimlich maneuver.
Yeah.
Keep people from choking. Well, he and Dr. Heimlich, a puppeteer, and Dr. Heimlich got together and created the world's first artificial heart, which was later bought out. The patent was bought by the University of Utah, then created Jarvik. So the
Wow.
point is, a puppeteer created a fake heart. I just find that to be so different because it wasn't something the industry was doing. So I throw these odd little things out from history because everybody thinks of Leonardo da Vinci, or you mentioned the Medicis, but no, we've had them. Even, one of my favorites is Richard Garriott, who invented the Ultima game series and the MMORPGs, the virtual world. When he created that, he used everything that he had in his life. He was a magician, he was into philosophy and religion. He created an entire landscape where I want to say the world, the fake world, the virtual world has its own morals and standards because that's what he infused into the Ultimate Game series when he started it, because he took everything he had and put it into that world. So even moving into modern day, we see that all the time. And some of the most successful people have been people that lived in multiple lanes and found a way to cross over, merge them together, and lane hop until they were successful.
That's awesome. And so everything is in the book, all the
Yes.
stories
Yeah.
you mentioned.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So if I'd love to finish this conversation, tell us a little bit how you came up with the idea of the book and the process to write it. And I know again it's available as March 1st, but give us the preview.
Yeah, absolutely. So the generalist advantage is it's called the general advantage. This is the rough cover, by the way. I'll hold up for those looking on screen. The generalist advantage: how to harness the raw power of cross-disciplinary thinking. The book was started as me, I want to say, trying to explain to the world what a generalist is and what they contribute. The book is divided into sections. So the first section is Seymour, which Seymour is basically explaining how to become a generalist, how they think, how the mindset works, some of the successful people. Then it goes into a section called Be More, which that section of the book explains how generalists are better decision makers, how our thought process works. So, yes, people, there's a little cognitive psychology in there, but trust me, it's written very simple because
Mm.
I explain cognitive psychology in terms of how I drive my Jeep. So I'm easy. And then how we see the future better. So if you know unknown unknowns, how generalists are more holistic, so we see more and we can do more because we see more. And then I have a whole section devoted to learn more, which is what I call my skills for learning. how you can learn something new faster and more concrete and apply it right away. So it's not the oh, go back to school and be academic. You can do that. But if you want to choose it on your own, here's the process of learning and how to learn faster. And then the final section, that's learn more. The final section is I call it the corporate approach of do more, which is how you can do more when you bring it all together and how it works in a corporate setting,
Mm.
and how you get everybody together and get your lanes merged. So it is a deep dive into the heart of a generalist. It was me, as I always say, setting off initially to provide justification to my mother, who always thought I should have been a specialist and never understood why I went in 20 directions. And, no, I mean, I always tell people my mother was very supportive. My mother's a great lady. She always told me I was good looking, intelligent, and I could be anything I wanted to be as long as it was a lawyer. So I always say when I started writing the book, it was a joke between my wife and daughters and I that daddy's writing a justification for why he is a generalist. And the more I wrote, the more it validated my belief structure. And I think as I've worked with people on my podcast or I've talked to people about the book, people are really realizing that the generalist is what I believe is the way of the future because the world is moving too fast to stay in a silo.
I
You've
love
got
it.
to be able to bridge.
I
So,
love it. Joe, thank you so much for sharing everything
thank
today.
you.
How do people get in touch with you? What's the name of your podcast? When is the book coming out? And
Sure. Basically, I can tell you this. My podcast is Be Multitudes Podcast. If you go to joecurcillo.com, everything in my world is there. It's joecurcillo.com. The book is coming out March 1st, and it'll be on Amazon. Other than that, getting a hold of me is joe@joecurcillo.com. Very easy to find. LinkedIn, Facebook, everywhere in the world, just Joe Curcillo leads to me. So it's joecurcillo.com. And if you didn't spell that, go to thegeneralistadvantage.com and you'll wind up at my page. So it's all easy.
awesome. I'm going to say not thank you, but thank you, ladies and gentlemen, with all those different professions and experiences to coming today. It was a great panel. I truly enjoyed it. And I can't wait to see you again very soon.
And we loved being here. Thank you. Take care.
Joe, thank you so much for your time today. Fascinating stories that you have. I love it. And I can wait to read your book, The Generalist Advantage. Once again, thank you for sharing all those insights with me today. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please go on LinkedIn. And if you enjoy this conversation and learn anything, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.